If you are a quilter who has decided to build or maintain a stash, you are probably asking yourself the universal question. You walk into a store and there's a sale, and how much should you buy? What are you going to actually use? What is going to be helpful to you? And it is asked of professionals. About 30 years ago, I heard the pat answers. And by those answers, I mean 3 yards. You have to buy 3 yards because that is the amount you'll need if you're going to have a border on a big quilt. You need at least 3 yards. But is it really the amount you need? I'm going to help you decide on exactly how much fabric you should buy when you're in a fabric shop. And so I'm going to give you the information you need to be able to answer that question for you. Before deciding how many yards of fabric to buy when you're at that sale, you must answer some questions. The first one is, do I enjoy fabric ownership? And by that I mean, do you have guilt if you have too much fabric? Is there something particular about storing fabric that bothers you? I have several friends who really are stressed out if they curate or have too big of a stash. So you have to decide, how big of a stash do I want? How many yards of fabric do I sew with per year? And if you're beginning, you may not know the answer to that. But as you progress and as you sew more quilts and do more creating, you will figure out what kind of a quilter you are. Do I prefer to quilt with scraps? Do I want to make my quilts 2-color quilts? Do I mostly plan to make king-size quilts, or am I going to be a miniature quilter and just make little tiny miniature quilts? Maybe I want to start making charity quilts. Who am I going to make them for? Am I going to make veterans quilts? Am I going to make baby quilts? All of the things that go into what kind of a quilter are you also helps us answer how much fabric to buy. As you decide on your storage space, how much you're going to give to curate a fabric stash, you want to make sure that all your fabric will be visible and that you'll be able to put hands on it and use it, because storing fabric you can't find and can't see isn't worth buying any fabric. The question I also ask myself is, can I buy this debt-free? Do I have the money to buy this? Going into debt for fabric will make the fabric feel miserable, and so I don't ever go into debt for fabric. All of these questions help you know how much to buy. I'm going to take you to a fabric store with me, and I'm going to buy fabric exactly the way I would buy it if you weren't watching, and I'll explain why and what my thought process is. So as I tell you how I buy fabric, it really will just inform your thinking about what you want to do. Current full price fabric in my area is $14.50. You just go in and buy a piece. I love those Santas, by the way. I will only buy full price fabric if I have an imminent need. Otherwise, I buy sale fabric. These fabrics are $4 a yard. My rule for myself is $5 or less a yard, and I get to have all I want if I love it. So I'm looking at these sales thinking, yeah, I love those too. Okay, this one I can see so many uses for. It's cool, I need it. So I just throw everything on the floor that I want. At $4 a yard, I can buy the rest of the bolt if I choose. That's my personal rule. This one would make such a great charity quilt, so I'll probably buy 1.5 yards of it. And then as I look, I kind of like the black, but I prefer the red and I don't want both, so I'm just going to buy the red one. As I look through the other prices, they have $6 and $7 a yard in the sale room, and I adore me a neutral with some sweetness on it. When the price is $6 to $7 a yard, I have to really think. I'm allowed to buy it if there's room in my stash. I only buy 1 to 3 yards of it unless I have a specific purpose in mind. So I don't go crazy at sales. This green, if I had room for it, I might buy it, but I don't need green, and I know that. If I were still building my stash instead of maintaining it, I would buy some of this green. It's just amazing. I would buy a whole bunch of these fabrics. But because I'm just maintaining, then I really go for the bigger sales, because there are always great fabrics at amazingly under $5 sales still. So if you're going to maintain or build a stash, you need to learn about yourself, what colors you use, how you're going to use them, how you're going to like using them. I love this, and I would buy it too if I were building a stash. So because I'm in a different position, my rules have changed to maintenance, and I use a lot of fabric. I use hundreds of yards of fabric every single year. So I'm allowed to buy fabric. I let myself buy all the fabric I want and love. Now, oranges, they have become beloved to me over the years, and this orange is exquisite because it has more tones of orange than just one. I just want this. I don't need it, I want it, and so I'm going to buy a little piece because I love it so much. If fabric costs more than $8 a yard, somehow in my mind it feels like full price, and so I just don't buy it unless I have an exact need for it. But $8 and less, I follow the rules I've given you. I've learned never to buy fabric just because it's on sale. You really have to love it. I have to know that I will choose to use it. Otherwise, it's just going to sit on my shelf. I have to know I have a tolerance for keeping it in storage because really, truly, I never have buyer's remorse. The rest of the bolt, please, comes out of my mouth all the time if the fabric is $5 or under. I have spent over $1,000 at an amazing sale before because I know that I use so much fabric. You don't want to be feeling guilt. If you use fabric, then you curate it. And if you are an artist and need some fabric with variety, then having a stash is what you want to do. You need to be able to know that you are happy and that you are working to your own habits. If you figure out the answers to the questions that this video has asked you, you will know exactly how much fabric that you need to buy for you. It is never okay to feel out of control. I never break the rule about debt. But sometimes I will change my other rules. All of a sudden I'll have a fabric and I'll think, I want all of this and it's $7 a yard because I know it's going to be wonderful as a backing for charity quilts. It will just lift them up and make them better. So maybe I'll buy the rest of the yard at $7 a yard. Your rules need to be the kind of rules that make you feel good about yourself. For me, a cord a yard is never enough unless I'm only making one specific scrap quilt. Otherwise, I want at least a yard. A yard gives me fabric to play with and fabric to store and fabric to put in my scrap bins because I really am a scrap quilter. So the real answer to knowing how much fabric to buy is to learning who you want to be as a quilter. Exactly what do you want to do with your quilting talent? Going back to the beginning of the video, that is what matters. So 3 yards, that's a great amount, but it's not really the answer. It just depends what kind of quilts you make. So asking other people is great because you get to listen to them and you get to talk about it, but each of us individually, we must decide for ourselves. The answer to how much fabric to buy is individual to you and it is within you. You will have to be the one to decide. For me, rest of the bolt please is my happiest thing to say. Stay merry and creative.